I'm a primary care physician. I've retired now, so yay. But when I was still working as a primary care doctor, I was working in an underserved area. And so I started doing some of my patients' pain management. And this was a time 30, 35 years ago when there weren't pain management specialists. And so I was doing this and helping these patients out because these people in chronic pain are debilitated. They really can't function. And so I was able to give them medication and get them better, more functional.
Gary Sprouse was a primary care doctor who took care of many pain patients, but he lost his DEA license, the license that allowed him to prescribe controlled substances. That turned his attention to helping his patients without drugs, and it led him on a quest to find a way to help people improve their mental health. He talks about this in his book, Highway to Your Happy Place, A Roadmap to Less Stress. Please welcome Gary Sprouse to Bump in the Road. Gary, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Pat, thanks for having me on the show. I'm looking forward to it. So I wanted to start out with I'm a primary care physician. I've retired now, so yay. But when I was still working as a primary care doctor, I was working in an underserved area. And so I started doing some of my patients' pain management. And this was a time 30, 35 years ago when there weren't pain management specialists. And so I was doing this and helping these patients out because these people in chronic pain are debilitated. They really can't function. And so I was able to give them medication and get them better, more functional. But somewhere along the line, the world of medicine changed and decided that pain management was causing more problems than it was helping, which I don't think is correct, but that's what it was at the time. And so the boards of physicians started to change. And so then they started looking into primary care doctors who were doing pain management. And so since I was doing a lot of it, I got under the microscope. And through a series of court cases and investigations that took place over 15 years, they kept saying, oh, we don't think you're doing a good job. And then I would say, look, I had a pain management specialist telling me I'm doing it all correctly. And they're like, well, we don't trust her and we like our people and they think you're doing a bad job. But over 15 years and hundreds of thousands of dollars of legal fees, eventually they ended up saying, you know what, we're going to take away your DEA license so that you're not going to be able to write opioid prescriptions for your pain management patients. Or because I was doing the opposite too, I was helping people who were having problems with heroin addictions and I was giving them Suboxone. So literally in one day, I went from writing for 350 people to I couldn't do it anymore, which was devastating to me, more devastating to my patients because it was very difficult to find other doctors who were willing to write their prescriptions and certainly not in one day. So it caused quite a turmoil in the area that I worked at.
How did you survive something like that?
Well, so during this time, like the book that I wrote, Highway to Your Happy Place, A Roadmap to Less Stress, the ideas had come to me 20, 25 years ago. And I was just in the process of putting it all together and formulate it into a book. And I mean, it was in the back burner, right? So being a doctor was in the front burner. So the book was taking a long time to come together. But the concepts in the book were things that I used to get through all that process. Because if I hadn't had those concepts, I've seen my other colleagues, they literally either just quit, they change, they go somewhere else, they stop seeing patients. And I'm like, no, my patients need me. And so I got to figure out a way to get through this. So it was some of the concepts that are in my book that helped me get through that crazy time.
Well, but if you can't write prescriptions anymore, what do you turn to? Are the concepts in the book part of where you start guiding your patients?
So I can write prescriptions for non-controlled substances. The DEA
Right.
license only allows you to write for controlled substances. So I couldn't write for pain medicine like opioids. I couldn't write for sleeping pills. I couldn't write for Xanax and things like that. So some of what that did was then force me to say, hey, is there other alternatives to figuring out ways to help people? And that's when, as the book was evolving, the concepts in the book became my alternative. So someone called me a holistic doctor, and I'm like, what? Wow, that sounds weird. And then I go, wait, I am a holistic doctor because I know all the medical stuff and the physiological stuff and the prescriptions. But now I also know the mental stuff and the psychological stuff and the psychiatric stuff. So yeah, so now when I come to when I see a patient, I'm coming from both sides of that partition to help them.
You urge people to get to their happy place. What is your happy place? Or
Yeah.
what is
So
one's happy place?
yeah, right. Okay. So here's, everybody has a different happy place, right? And you go, oh, I want to be at the beach. I want to be in the woods. I want to be on the ocean, whatever. They all have differences. But when I started evaluating what a happy place is, here's what I found is that I think a happy place is a house. Okay. So if your happy place is a house, everybody's house has a kitchen and a dining room and a living room and a closet and a bathroom and a bedroom, but they're in different shapes and they have different carpets and they're painted differently and they have different furniture. So the rooms are the same, but how they decorate it is different. And so what I found with happy places, the rooms are all the same. It's just people decorated with different things. So what makes one person pleasurable might not be for another person. What one person finds grateful for might not be grateful to another person. And so, but the rooms are all the same. And so that's when I was like, okay, here's what we got to write down. What are the rooms of a happy place? Because once you understand where it is you're trying to get to, well, then it's way easier. So if I don't know, you probably use GPS. Like if I go, hey, I want to go somewhere, and GPS is like, well, where do you want to go? And you're like, somewhere. And you're like, well, that doesn't work. You can't just put somewhere in there. It doesn't go in there. So when I talk to people and when I'm doing lectures and stuff like that, I go, so where would you want to be if you were less stressed? And they're like, I don't know. Never really got that far. I only thought about being less stressed. So as I started identifying the happy place, you could see them change. You go, well, I can do that. Yeah.
It seems to me that part of having less stress in your life is learning to watch and control your thoughts.
Yeah, it's an interesting thought, right? So there's two approaches to our thinking. So we think literally all the time, right? Like even in our sleep, we're thinking, right? There's dreams and stuff like that. And there's two ways you can do it. One is you go, I'm going to control my thoughts. And I think people that are doing meditations and they're out in monasteries up on the top of a mountain, they're trying to control what goes on in their head. The other way is to see it as an ocean where you can't really control the ocean, but you can ride the ocean. You can get on a surfboard and ride the waves. You can be on a boat and ride the waves. So I tend to be in that category where you can't really stop. Because if I said to you, don't think of an elephant, the first thing you do is picture an elephant, right? Excuse me. So what I tell patients is like ride the wave. There's always going to be thoughts running through your head literally all the time. And when they get into trouble is they're riding the wave. This thought comes up, that thought comes up. Oh, wait, that one? Oh, I don't like that thought. And then their focus shifts and they become focused on that bad thought. And then they get this whole physiological reaction, which then snowballs into even more. And that's where they get into trouble. But if you say, you know what, your brain's always going to be moving around and thinking there's going to be good and bad and indifferent and weird and strange. And like, where'd that come from? Just think of it as you're surfing a wave and you're just riding along and you can pay attention, and that's where the control comes in. You can choose what to pay attention to, but the thoughts themselves are just going to roll along.
Well, I think Candace Pert showed that our thoughts become our biology. There's no question about that. But I would argue I've been meditating for about 20 years. And I would say that the ability to still your mind is a very real one. And in that, there is a great deal of peace.
That's why I'm saying there's both ways. So if you can still your mind, I think when you still your mind, you're tending to decrease the amount of the quantity of thoughts, but you're also choosing which ones to pay attention to.
You know, it's so interesting. My meditation teacher studied with Maharishi, and he
Okay.
addressed exactly that. He used to say, you know, if you're in a meditation and your marketing list comes to mind, and
Yeah.
all you can think about is broccoli, so you see the broccoli floating by,
Ah,
right?
okay. Yeah.
Just let it go.
Right, but that's my point. So like the thoughts are still going to roll around. You just have to figure out, hey, I don't need to pay attention to this or that. This is the one. So being able to, and the word I use is directed awareness. So when I can direct my awareness, the better I can be at that, then I can have better control of what thoughts stimulate some emotional response.
Would you say the ability to watch your thoughts is awareness?
Absolutely. And that's why I add the word direct, because humans, I think this is the skill that we've added to the environment. We have directed awareness. So my dog has awareness. I mean, she knows that I'm around. She knows my wife. She knows when there's food around, but she doesn't have the ability to direct her awareness. So I can go, hey, I want to focus on broccoli today, and let's do that. Or I want to raise my right arm. Okay, I'm going to do that because I have some skill, a part of my brain that says, hey, that's where the nerves are that make your right arm. That's where the memory of broccoli is. So I can direct my awareness, and that is what makes us human.
So walk me through the steps to peace.
Well, here's an interesting concept, right? So I was doing a talk the other day. So it depends how you define peace, right? So I'm a big believer in you got to define things before you can start fixing them. And what I found was a lot of words like happy place aren't well defined, so then they're really hard to fix. Things like worry and being overwhelmed, they're not very easy. They haven't been well defined or concretely defined, and so they're really hard to fix. So peace, I would put into that. I would call my happy place a peaceful place, right? I would equate those two words. And so really what it comes down to is how do you get to to me, peace would be how do you get to your happy place. And if you're in your happy place, then you're going to be at peace. Okay. So the happy place, do you want me to tell you the rooms? Should I give them to you real quick?
Sure.
Okay. So what I find is contentment is the first room. And contentment is like we have positive and negative feelings all the time. And that balance, wherever they balance each other out, is where your level of contentment is. So some people are very contented because they have a lot of happy and not very bad. Some people are not very contented because they have a lot of bad and not very happy. It just depends. But that contentment tends to be a baseline. And we were talking about this earlier. Mindset plays a big role in that. So I've met rich people who are not contented, and I've met poor people who are very contented. So there are some of the variables are the external variables aren't really that important to your contentment. It has more to do with your mindset. The second room is pleasure and love and fun. And the nice thing about this, it makes us feel good, but by definition, it tends to be short. So it's like, hey, I graduated from medical school, yay! But a couple years later, I'm like, okay, that was in the past, and it's not that much pleasurable anymore because it's great, but it was in the past, right? And then the third thing is anticipation of pleasure, and this actually is incredibly important to humans. So I can go, hey, my wife and I are getting ready to go on a vacation 6 months from now. So that means for 6 months, I get to think about all the fun that it's going to be on that vacation, all the pleasures we're going to have. And in my head, it's going to be a perfect vacation. The luggage won't get lost. My tickets are going to be there. The food's going to be great. My friends are going to be really good. Right. So, and then I got 6 months of that. The trip's only going to last a week, and it might not be that great. I don't know. Who knows what's going to happen? But the anticipation, wow, that's going to go on for a long time. The fourth thing is gratitude. And I find that we talk about gratitude a lot, but I don't think we get anywhere close to feeling the kind of gratitude that we should. So just like we were talking earlier, it's like we have this technology, and it's like it gets so mundane that we think of it, take it for granted. Think about a TV. Like, if you were the king of Norway 200 years ago, you didn't have indoor plumbing, you didn't have indoor heating, you didn't have air conditioning, you didn't have a TV, you didn't have a telephone. What? Right? So there's a lot of things that we need to be grateful for, and we don't even take into consideration. And I must admit, I've been there before. I was talking to a friend of mine about antibiotics, and he's like, it wasn't that long ago that we didn't have antibiotics. And you're like, wait, what? Like, think about trying to be a doctor when there wasn't antibiotics and people would get a strep throat and die, or they'd get pneumonia and die. And you're like, nowadays, you just give them a couple of pills and they're better. Like, no, 100 years ago, you died if you had that kind of stuff. So gratitude is something that we have to really pay attention. So my patients will come in and say, hey, doc, I'm falling apart. I'm like, yeah, no. For every one thing that you have wrong, there's 1,000 things that are going right. And they're like, well, and I'm like, I said, do your eyelids close? And they look at me like, what? I go, do your eyelids close? And they're like, well, yeah, of course they close. And I'm like, well, guess what? Some of my patients, they don't. So you should be grateful that your eyelids close, right? That kind of stuff. So the next one is fulfillment. So fulfillment is made up of learning, which humans are very curious. Two, sharing and giving, because we live in a group. We're very communal. And so we want everybody in our group to be good, right? And then the third part is having a purpose in life, something that when you wake up in the morning, you're excited and you're enthusiastic about. And I find this is where, so in my retirement, this is the stuff that's giving me fulfillment, right? My wife, who did the billing for my office, who hated it, hated doing the billing. So when I retired, she didn't have to do it anymore. But now she wakes up going, what am I supposed to do with myself? And you're like, oh, right. So we need to find her a purpose that she can get up and be excited and enthusiastic about. And then the last room I call it CASH. It's an acronym, and it stands for being connected and being accepted and feeling appreciated. And then here's the one that has something to do with peace. It's called safety, feeling safe. And then the last one is hope, which is like, hey, even if I'm in a crappy situation now, it's going to get better. So when you put all those things, those rooms together, wow, what a nice, peaceful place that would be, right?
One of the things you talk about is boredom. And
Yes.
I've always had a saying that if I'm bored, it's because I'm becoming boring. But
Okay.
you take a different take on boredom. Talk
I
about
do,
it.
right? So interesting. I had a good friend of mine, a psychologist, and she read the book and she's like, oh my gosh, I never really thought of boredom as that bad a thing. But she says, yeah, no, it's really bad, right? So I think about when my life as a teenager, and you're sitting around going, and you're like, literally, we were riding around in a parking lot at a shopping mall looking for something to happen. You're like, yeah, boredom is bad, bad, bad. And what I write about in the book is boredom is so bad that when we put somebody in jail because they've killed somebody, and then they do something wrong in jail, we punish them. And what do we punish them with? We punish them with boredom, and we put them in solitary confinement, which is bad. I mean, people go crazy when they've been in solitary confinement for a couple of weeks, and you're like, no, it's really bad. And I think we underestimate how stressful boredom is. But what I see is that younger people tend to get more boredom feelings because their curiosity, I think, this is my personal feeling. I don't have any studies to say this, but when we're young, we're exploring our environment a lot, and we're trying to make up all this, taking all this information around us, because that's how we survived. I mean, you had to know where the rocks were, where the dangers were, where the food was, where the nuts were, where the berries were. So we are told, I mean, our body is set up to be incredibly curious. So when you then don't give it anything to be curious about, it doesn't take long and you're feeling bored. As you get older, you don't need as much stimulation to not be bored because you already got a lot of this information. Your curiosity level goes down. But
I'm going to argue with that. I don't think it
yeah,
does necessarily go down, but I think curiosity is a really important point because curiosity leads you into all sorts of things. And in this world, we were talking about the online world that we live in, or that we live partly in, and there is so much to explore for a curious person.
yeah. Well, like, and I'm sure you've learned this. The more you know, the more you realize you don't know. It's like,
Absolutely.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, yeah, but it can get overwhelming. That's where we have to be careful, right? So because there's so much I mean, this is the grateful part, right? We literally on my phone is the all the information in the world is right here, right? So it's like it's kind of crazy to even think about that, how much power that gives people. But it comes with a side effect, which is it can get overwhelming. So you have to be real careful about how you do that. There are clearly people that stay curious for their whole life. No, I'm not saying that people aren't curious as they get older. I just say they're a little less curious because they have other things that they've already been doing, so they don't have to be as curious. Like I already know how to be a doctor, so I don't need to go back and learn how to be a doctor again, right? But
No,
I agree with
you're
you. I'm now
curious.
curious because I'm learning how to be an author, which is a whole different skill set. That's for sure.
Well, and I think some of our skills are evolving, like you have to take continuing education and things like that.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So, there's always something new on the horizon, and I think part of maturity is learning to, go deep rather than have a scattered curiosity, to have a more focused curiosity,
And
and
I
because
agree.
it's more
Yep.
focused, it doesn't make it less.
Yes, I agree. But it makes you less likely to get bored because because you have better skills, you have better awareness, you have more experience, you have better tools on how to handle it.
Oh, I think that's true. I think part of, going through life is gaining better tools. What are some of the tools that people really need?
Yeah, well, so one of the ones I talk about, there's a couple tools I talk about. First off, so what I found was a lot of my patients coming in that were worried. So my favorite patient was Doc, I'm worried that I worry too much. And I'm like, well, then you probably do worry too much, right? So what I found was worry is a big stress. Probably at least 50% of most people's stresses is they worry. Okay. So when I say to people, tell me what worry is, they get this look in their eye like, oh, sure, I know what that is. That's it's that feeling. It's I'm worried about something. Like, yeah, yeah, okay. See, and I go, okay, well, I get that you know what it feels like and you know how to use it in a sentence, but your definition is very superficial, so it makes it hard to fix. So I had to come up with a concrete definition that I think makes it more fixable. So my definition is like, we have this amazing skill that we can envision the future. Then two, is that we then focus on all the bad things that can happen. And then the third thing, which is where the physiologic comes in, which is then we have this fear reaction to, oh, I don't want that to happen. So when you put all those three together, that's what worry is. So if that's the definition, you're like, okay, well, how do I fix that? Well, first off, grateful that I can envision the future because my patients with dementia, they don't have that skill. They've lost it. They can't look into the future. They don't go around, hey, who's going to pay for the nursing home next month? Because they don't have that skill. My 1-year-old grandson doesn't have that skill. So he's not sitting at the dinner table trying to figure out how college is going to get paid for because he doesn't have that skill. So first off, be grateful that you have the skill to be envision the future because it makes us so much more successful. But then second is this is where our choice comes in. So I can choose to focus on all the bad things, or I can choose to focus on all the good things. So I can look there and I go, like when I use myself as an author, when I was writing the book, I'm like, well, I could say, well, this book's there's literally millions of books out there. Who's going to buy my book? Even if I finish it, who's going to read it? And who's it going to help? Which then makes you feel bad. Or I could go, hey, this book's going to be awesome. People are going to read it. They're going to feel so much better. They're going to call me up and say, Dr. Sprouse, thank you so much. Which then makes you feel good. And you're like, well, then that makes me want to keep writing the book. And so you get to choose, do I focus on possible bad outcomes or possible good outcomes? So one of the tools that I use is what I call realistic optimism. So what I encourage people to do is pick and choose to focus on the good outcomes. Yes, my book's going to be great and it's going to help a lot of people, but you have to be realistic. And so that means you can't ignore that bad things could happen. So I had to keep my day job for a while because the book wasn't going to support me. So I had to keep my day job. That's where the realism part comes in until I was ready. And then I could say, okay, now we're going to switch over and just do that. So realistic optimism becomes critical because you can't run around with just rose colored glasses and live your life because you're going to end up in trouble if you do that. And then the third thing then is how to take the physiological fear reaction out of it. And that's an interesting process. So what I found was that most people, when they're worried, it's in their head, right? They're just going, oh, what if this, what if this, what if this, what if this? And they literally 2 o'clock in the morning, they wake up, oh, they can't sleep because their fear reaction is gone. And that fear, we call it worry, but it's really fear. And it's fear of something that might happen. So it hasn't even happened yet. It's just a concept. So what I did was I said, look, we need to put this on a piece of paper. So I made up this thing called a worry organizer and it has 5 columns. So I'll run through a patient just real quick. So one of my patients came in worried that she's going to have breast cancer. So the first column is, what are you worried about? So she was worried I was going to get breast cancer. Then the second column is, well, why are you worried about it? So in her case, it turned out her sister and her mother had both had breast cancer. Not unreasonable. Third category, and this is the important one, is, well, how likely is it to happen to you? And if it does happen, how dangerous is it? Okay. So this is where we can be objective, as opposed to going, oh, a plane's going to crash. You go, wait, how often is it going to crash? All right. So in this lady's case, I said, well, how likely is it that you're going to get breast cancer? And she said 100%. And I go, well, okay, well, so people can die of breast cancer. How likely is it that you're going to die of breast cancer? She said 100%. Well, think about it. So she had basically given herself a death sentence. 100% likely she's going to get breast cancer, 100% likely she's going to die. Well, then that's a hard life to live, right? So what I said to her is, look, let me give you the statistics that come from medical journals. There's a 50% chance that you're going to get breast cancer if you have a family history. And because we're going to catch it early, there's an 85% chance you're going to survive it. Well, her whole body posture changed because it was like, oh my God, she just got her life back, right? Now it's only, wait, she's like only 15%? Yes, 15%. I mean, 85% chance for, yes, 85%. So it was like her life got back just by looking at some numbers. Then the fourth category is, so what can I do to make it not happen? So then we talked about self-examinations and mammograms and BRCA genes and da-da-da. And then the last category, and this is the one I think is where we can really help people, which is like, well, what do I do if I get breast cancer? What do I do if it happens? And this is where you can plan. And the key is without fear. So now you can plan. You go, okay, well, look, I can make my will up. If I get breast cancer and die, I want to make sure my will and my kids are taken care of. I can research out where the best breast cancer institutes are now while I'm still, like I'm fine. So I can do, and you start making a list of things that you can do to deal with whatever catastrophe is going to happen, right? And the key is without fear. And then once it's written down, then it's done. Then it doesn't have to keep running around in your head because it's right on a piece of paper. And the benefit of the paper is you only have to do it once. And then if something else comes up, you can add. Or you can say, hey, I got my piece of paper. Hey, doc, can you see anything else I can add to this list? And you're like, oh, yeah, look, yeah, those statistics aren't the right ones, right? You got to change 50. So, or you can add this and do a bracketing, right? So there's all these things that you can add, but it makes it way more efficient. So what I tell people is I don't want you to stop worrying, but I do want you to worry efficiently and try to take the fear out of it so that you're using your skill of envision the future, but planning without fear.